So we're going to talk today about collaborative problem solving. And this is an amazing technique that I first encountered working with kids, working with my own kids, but it is actually incredibly useful across all the relationships in your life. So why we're going to talk about this connects back to this idea we talk about all the time, that there are these four key components when you're going after joyful impact. There are four personal commitments that you can make that will really bring joy and impact into your life. The first is about getting visionary, prioritizing social impact above ego-driven needs. The second is about getting real, seeking and speaking the truth to everyone, including yourself. The third is about getting together. It's treating others with consideration, not contempt. And the fourth is about getting better. It's committing to the daily pursuit of personal growth and joy across all the areas of your life. And in today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on getting together, on treating others with consideration, not contempt. And this collaborative problem-solving framework really fits squarely within that arena. And, I'm working on this book and about philanthropy and what's wrong with it and how to fix it. And this issue just comes up again and again that, in philanthropy, we're not treating each other well. We're not treating each other with respect. There are different power dynamics going on. And a lot of times people are coming from this place of fear that they're not going to be able to get what they need. And that makes it hard to get real. It's hard to seek and speak the truth. It makes it hard to prioritize the big impact over your personal needs, and it just gets in the way. And so this framework is, one of several things that we can do. I've done other sessions on deep listening and also on partnership brokering. So this is kind of filling out this framework that we've talked about, this spectrum of interpersonal dynamics. It sounds all highfalutin, but really what we're talking about in this whole framework is like how we get along with each other and what kind of power dynamics arise when we're working with other people. And in this case, we're really talking about these key tactics. We've talked about deep listening previously. We've talked about partnership brokering. So today we're talking about collaborative problem solving. So what is this? Well, parenting, it turns out, if no surprise, is an amazing laboratory for solving problems or dealing with problems as they arise. And my own story here is that when my first son was about 2 or 3, as he really, began to become more and more independent and had his own ideas about what he wanted to do, my wife and I were looking for, we felt like there had to be some system, right? There, you don't get an owner's manual with your first child, but there has to be someone must have figured this out before. And a friend had told us about 1, 2, 3 Magic, which is, as you can see from the cover, 1.5 million copies sold. It's a system of parenting that's really about setting a clear expectation. And then, if you've ever heard parents counting, that's a 1, that's a 2, that's a 3. Now there's the consequence because you didn't meet the standard. And that seemed like it would work. It seemed really clear. But the problem was that our son just, what if he didn't want to do it? What if he didn't agree to have a timeout? What do you do then? You're going to find yourself pretty quickly in a place where you're going from, compliance to compulsion. Because what are you going to do? Like lock his door? I mean, that just wasn't the kind of parenting that we wanted to engage in. We felt like there had to be a better way. So if 1, 2, 3 Magic is working for you as a parent, that's great. I'm not here to criticize that, but it really just wasn't connecting for us with like what we felt like our values were and how we wanted to show up in the relationship with our son. And so we came across another approach it's in a book called Raising Human Beings by Ross Greene. And what he really lays out is just a different way of thinking about this. And when you trace this back, it goes all the way back to a psychologist named Alfred Adler, who was a contemporary of Freud and Jung, but kind of broke with them around 1909. This is sort of ancient history. And he just had a different view of children's development that I think is really resonant even to this day. And so the key insight here is that kids do well if they can. Kids will meet our expectations if they can, not kids do well if they want to, right? So a lot of times when we're in a conflict with a kid or just another person, we have this sense that, they are willfully disregarding us. they don't want to do this thing, and therefore I need to begin to try to coerce them or influence them to use these kind of more aggressive tactics, and all the way to pressure tactics. And then we hate to even think of the use of force, but like people use force with small children sometimes when the child won't listen to them. They're putting them in their room and closing the door and that kind of thing. And that's just not where we wanted to come from. So the insight that Ross Greene and others have had is that a lot of times kids don't have what they need in order to take action effectively. And he particularly, Ross Greene, focuses on the skills, that there's a skill deficit that leads to that behavior. And so rather than assuming that your child doesn't want to listen to you or doesn't want to do the thing that you've said, hey, this is our expectation, you could actually say, no, there's some obstacle. They can't do it. There's something in their way. They need to learn something here. And again, you can go back to this framework of psychology that we use all the time, thinking about these innate human drives. How are children meeting their needs? And especially with kids, you want to listen first around the egocentric needs, security, novelty, social status, social connection. So do I feel safe? Listen, does the kid feel safe? Do I feel entertained? Does the kid feel entertained? Are they meeting that need for novelty? Do I feel like I matter to myself and others? Are they meeting that need for social status? And then social connection. Do I feel connected to others? And most times when you get that problem behavior, it's arising because kids can't find a better way to meet those fundamental needs. And this was an insight that a guy named Rudolf Dreikurs wrote about in a book, The Challenge of Parenthood. And he was actually someone who studied under Alfred Adler. And he wrote this book actually long time ago, 1947, but it's such a classic that it was still being published. You can still get it to this day. And it is also sold lots of copies out there. So there is this different way of thinking about collaborating with your child. And when you're seeing these problem behaviors, Dreikurs points out that there are 4 goals that the kids have. They're seeking attention. They're trying to get control or power. They're trying to get back at others, like revenge, which may seem childish, but even into adulthood, a lot of us end up being, carrying that motivation in our actions. And then the 4th is just, it's so poignant. It's like they're acting out to show inadequacy, to show that actually they need to learn something. There's a skill or a mindset or some knowledge that they need to develop. And so the idea with collaborative parenting and collaborative problem solving is you assume the best, right? You start with deep listening for what needs the other person is not able to meet. And you assume the best, that this is a situation where they can't act in the way that you hope they would, not that they're unwilling to do so. And it really just calls on your empathy and your patience. This is not easy to do. You have to build this muscle, and it does take time. And I know that when I'm doing this problem solving with my kids, it's you have to step back from the situation. And I'm not going to go deep into this. There's a whole, Ross Greene's book is excellent. There's a whole website about it. There are, a lot of different ways that you can do this. But what I really want to share with you is this framework for collaborative problem solving that works so well with kids also is effective with other adults. And it results in solutions that everyone agrees to. And that's really important because when you get to a solution that you have imposed, you don't have buy-in. You don't have commitment from the other person. At best, you have compliance. And that's not a stable solution, right? And if you've ever, said to a kid, we just have to do it this way, and they don't agree, you're going to be having that same conversation again and again and again until you come up with a solution that everyone can buy into. So what are the actual steps here? Well, the first is you have to identify and agree on the problem that you're trying to solve. And sometimes that actually takes a while, especially with kids, to really articulate, what is this problem that keeps coming up? But chances are, if you keep having the same issues come up again and again, you have an expectation, the kid's behavior is not meeting your expectation, that's a problem. And you want to think about how can you solve it. The second is to invite the other person to share all their concerns about the situation that's surrounding this problem. And this alone is remarkable as a calming mechanism for kids. When you're in a conflict or a kid has gotten upset about something, simply asking them, so what are your concerns here? It's really striking how almost immediately I've found with my own kids and with others, they start to calm down. You can watch them physically calm down. The crying tends to stop as they begin to speak. And listen, there are times when you can't use this, when people are too upset. So sometimes you have to come back to use this after the initial upset has passed. But it's really, it can even be used in the moment as a way to calm and kind of recenter the situation. And then as each concern is listed, you repeat it back. You check for understanding. You don't comment on it. You don't dispute it. Because the concerns really are stated about feelings. Like they're subjective. They're opinions. They can't be proven or disproven. They're simply how someone feels about something. And then you check again. If the child goes all the way through and then seems like they're done, you say, do you have any other concerns? And sometimes like a whole other thing will come out right then. So just keep checking until literally the child says, I don't have any more concerns, or no. Because then like, okay, you've got it on the table. That's what we've got to work with. This is the point at which you share your concerns. You get all the concerns from the other person out, and now you share yours. And then you simply look creatively at everything you put out on the table and see if you can come up with something that creatively meets the key concerns that you've each listed. Now you might say like, okay, that's like, how is that even possible? Well, a lot of times what happens as you're going through these concerns is you realize like what the initial concerns aren't actually the really most important ones. And somewhere along the way, you realize like, hey, the needs that my child is trying to meet here and the needs that I'm trying to meet are not incompatible, because we all have the same basic needs, right? So those needs are common. And what's often the conflict is the way that we're trying to meet those needs. And so once you realize that, there's a whole world of creativity that opens up about how you can both meet your need for a calm environment. Or, I have a need for calm, you have a need for excitement. Well, can we figure that out, right? Like maybe, you can just see how once you kind of name it and you can really tame it and begin to collaborate. So if you're thinking about using this, not just with children, but with other adults, there are a few adaptations that you probably want to think about. One is to step away from hierarchy as a power source. When you're dealing with kids, you are kind of in a hierarchy, right? Because parenting, literally under the law, like you have responsibility for this other person. And when you're dealing with someone else out in the world, whether it's in your, another adult, professionally or personally, you don't want to be leaning on hierarchy. So what that means is, as a parent, you might be able to say, hey, I have a standard, I have an expectation, and let's problem solve about how you can meet that expectation. When you're applying this with other adults, you're not starting from the standpoint of like, I know absolutely what is right here, and let's figure out how you can meet this expectation. You need to step back from that. Even if you are so convinced that you're right and you know kind of what needs to happen, you want to remember this framework, that the first place you want to go when you're engaged in interpersonal dynamics with another adult is not from the place of you trying to get someone else to do something, but all the way over here to see if the other person can persuade and inspire you about their own perspective. Can you actually follow that other person? That's where you start, because that opens you up to a kind of reframing the problem. So do some deep listening first and see if you really do need to convince them. Like if after you've really listened deeply to them, you're still sure that the answer is not what they are saying needs to happen, then you kind of enter this kind of collaborative space where you use collaborative problem solving to try to figure out a way that you can both agree on. And listen, there are times when you need to persuade and inspire people. There are even times, particularly in advocacy and social justice work, when you need to use pressure tactics. And clearly, with other adults and with kids, for sure, we don't want to be using force. But it is amazing and unfortunate how much that threat of force or use of force does come up in our relationships. And having these tools really helps us from getting backed up into a place where we feel like we don't have good options for how to do something without coercion, without force. So lastly, like it could feel kind of awkward to do this. Like if you're working with your kid, okay, maybe I could wrap my head around like we have a conversation about collaborative problem solving. We agree we're going to solve problems this way. I mean, my kids now will come to me and say, I want to problem solve about this. But you may not have that experience with other adults in your life. They may not be familiar with this framework. So how do you actually initiate this? Well, one way in is really to say, like, here's what I'm feeling in this situation. What are you feeling concerned about? And what would you need to feel better about this situation? So those are kind of questions that seem fairly benign. Like you could probably imagine yourself asking those to a colleague or someone else. But to kind of drill in further on how to get into this, there's another really helpful book out there by Marshall Rosenberg. It's called Nonviolent Communication. And Rosenberg really pioneered this very simple framework. If you've ever heard of I messages, they're a great pathway into collaborative problem solving. So let's say you're just in a situation that you feel is kind of high stakes. You might have a conflict with someone else and you're not sure how to proceed. Even if you have no prior agreement with this person about how to solve problems, this can be a way to just open up the dialogue and get into a place where you can actually do some collaborative problem solving. So it goes like this. You say, when this happens, X. So you describe only the factual circumstances at issue without making a judgment or editorializing. Like you could say, when we don't have a clearly agreed upon way to measure success in this project. That could be the start of your I statement. The second piece is, I feel anxious and out of sorts. So when we don't have a clearly agreed upon way to measure success in this project, I feel anxious and out of sorts. So you're describing your state of mind, what you're feeling inside yourself. And you're trying to avoid language like I feel judged or, that makes it seem like the other person is doing something to you. So you want to use feelings like I am sad, I am angry, I am happy. You want to focus on yourself and don't make any reference to the other person. And then the third piece is the because, the reason why, connected to your needs, to your values. So, when we don't have a clearly agreed upon way to measure success in this project, I feel anxious and out of sorts. Because to show up as my best self, I need to feel aligned with my colleagues and have a clear sense of priorities about how to organize my day for maximum impact. So that's an example of an I statement. And when you get to that point, you've shared the factual circumstances, your feeling, and how it connects to your needs and your ability to meet those needs. You stop. Don't say anything else. Let the other person sit with that. And chances are they're going to come back to you in a constructive way because you've set up kind of an adult collaborative dynamic there. Some of you may have heard of parent-child dynamics in communication. Well, this is like a way to get going in an adult framework. And just wait. It may be awkward. It may, there may be some silence there, but just wait. And see if what they say next has something to do with how they're feeling and what their needs are. Listen for, where they may be stuck trying to meet their needs. And now at this point, you can frame a possible solution in a way like, could it work for both of us if we did X? And, do your best to make a collaborative proposal that meets both people's needs. So what I've tried to do here is just share this idea that we can start with collaborative problem solving with kids. It's a great way to parent in a collaborative, non-coercive way. And it's also a great technique for using with other adults. And Marshall Rosenberg's framework of I messages is really just a very simple way of engaging in conversations that can be an on-ramp into this place where, okay, we have our needs, our interests on the table, and we're having a real conversation about how we can each meet those needs. Because again, going back to that framework of psychology, we have the same needs, all of us. And what really just varies is the vehicles we have for meeting those needs. And so when you come at it that way and you're willing to listen carefully to how other people are trying to meet their needs, you can very often come up with creative solutions that wouldn't have seemed apparent to you at the outset. And getting together effectively with other people is fundamental to your joy and your impact out in the world. If you like this video and you want to access the worksheet or any other material that goes with it, just click the link below or head on over to joyfulimpact.co. That's the website where we have all the material we use for working with coaching and personal development for change agents. You can set up a free account in the members area, and you can also check out the blog where we have new content coming out all the time. Why are we putting all this out there for free? Because the world has never been more in need of a new greatest generation of change agents. I hope this material is helpful to you, and if it is, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That will help us spread the word.